Jai Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Reading from Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, Adi-lila, chapter 7, text 118. Aparayamitastu anyam Prakritim vinime param Jiva bhuta mahabaho Yaidam dajate jagat Aparayamitastu anyam Prakritim vinime param Jiva bhuta mahabaho Yaidam dajate jagat Apara inferior energy Iyam this material world Ita beyond this Tu but Anyam another Prakritim energy Vidhi you must know May of me Param which is superior energy Jiva bhutam they are the living entities Mahabaho O mighty armed Ya by which Idam this material world Dayate is being conducted Jagat the cosmic manifestation. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Besides this inferior nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is a superior energy of mind, which is all living entities who are struggling with material nature and are sustaining the universe. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, it is explained that the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, constitute the gross energy of the Absolute Truth, and that there are also 3 subtle energies, namely the mind, intelligence, and false ego, or identification with the phenomenal world. Thus, the entire cosmic manifestation is divided into 8 energies, all of which are inferior. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, Mama Maya Duratyaya, the inferior energy known as Maya is so strong that although the living entity does not belong to this energy, due to the superior strength of the inferior energy, the living entity, Jiva Bhuta, forgets his real position and identifies with it. Krishna says distinctly that beyond the material energy there is a superior energy which is known as Jiva Bhuta, or living entities. When in contact with the material energy, this superior energy conducts all the activities of the entire material phenomenal world. The supreme cause is Krishna, Janma Dyasya Yataha, who is the origin of all energies which work variously. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has both inferior and superior energies, and the difference between them is that the superior energy is factual, whereas the inferior energy is a reflection of the superior. A reflection of the sun in a mirror or on water appears to be the sun, but is not. Similarly, the material world is but a reflection of the spiritual world. Although it appears to be factual, it is not. It is only a temporary reflection, whereas the spiritual world is a factual reality. The material world, with its gross and subtle forms, is merely a reflection of the spiritual world. The living entity is not a product of the material energy, he is spiritual energy. But in contact with matter, he forgets his identity. Thus, the living entity identifies himself with matter and enthusiastically engages in material activities in the guises of technologist, scientist, philosopher, etc. He does not know that he is not at all a material product, but is spiritual. His real identity thus being lost, he struggles very hard in the material world, and the Hare Krishna movement or Krishna consciousness movement tries to revive his original consciousness. His activities in manufacturing big skyscrapers are evidence of intelligence, but this kind of intelligence is not at all advanced. One should know that his only real concern is how to get free from material contact. For by absorbing his mind in material activities, he takes material bodies again and again. And although he falsely claims to be very intelligent in material consciousness, he is not at all intelligent. When we speak about the Krishna consciousness movement, which is meant to make people intelligent, the conditioned living entity therefore misunderstands it. He is so engrossed in the material concept of life that he does not think that there can be any activities which are actually based on intelligence beyond the construction of skyscrapers and big roads and the manufacturing of cars. This is proof of maya pritagyana, or loss of all intelligence due to the influence of maya. When a living entity is freed from such misconceptions, he is called liberated. When one is actually liberated, he no longer identifies with the material world. The symptom of mukti, liberation, is that one engages in spiritual activities instead of falsely engaging in material activities. Transcendental loving devotional service is the spiritual activity of the spirit soul. Mayavadi philosophers confuse such spiritual activities with material activity, but Bhagavad Gita confirms Mam cha yo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatityaitam brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Bhagavad Gita 14:26. One who engages in the spiritual activities of unalloyed devotional service is immediately elevated to the transcendental platform, and he is to be considered Brahma Bhuta, which indicates that he is no longer in the material world, but in the spiritual world. Devotional service is enlightenment or awakening. When the living entity perfectly performs spiritual activities under the direction of the spiritual master, he becomes perfect in knowledge and understands that he is not God, but a servant of God. As explained by Caitanya Mahaprabhu, Jivara Swarupoy Krishna Nityadas. The real identity of the living entity is that he is an eternal servant of the Supreme. As long as one does not come to this conclusion, he must be in ignorance. This is also confirmed by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Gyanabam Mam Prapajante. After many births of struggling for existence and cultivating knowledge, when one comes to the point of real knowledge, he surrenders unto me. Such an advanced Mahatma or great soul is very rarely to be seen. Thus, although the Mayavadi philosophers appear to be very advanced in knowledge, they are not yet perfect. To come to the point of perfection, they must voluntarily surrender to Krishna. Translation, Bhagavad Gita. Besides the inferior nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is a superior energy of mind, which is all living entities who are struggling with material nature and are sustaining the universe. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmanitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master has very kindly come, forced open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my most respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. So this wonderful conversation, deeply philosophical conversation between Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and Prakashananda Saraswati is continuing, and as Prabhupada concluded that beautiful, profound purport, we do have on the spiritual path perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. There is a wonderful example of perfection in Mahaprabhu's visit to many temples in southern India. And in one of those temples, he observed a devotee of Krishna who was illiterate. He was a Brahmana, but he'd never received a thorough education. But his Guru Maharaj had instructed him every day, read one chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And Mahaprabhu observed that this devotee, he was actually shedding tears of love for Krishna. And he was turning the pages of the Gita. Some of the local people who knew him would sometimes cut jokes at his expense. But Mahaprabhu sought out this great soul's association and inquired from him how it was that even though he couldn't read properly, still somehow or other he was fulfilling this instruction he'd been given by his Gurudev to read, or at least try to read, Bhagavad Gita every day. So this devotee explained that whenever I think about Krishna, who became the chariot driver of his devotee Arjuna, how much love the Lord has for his devotees. Bhakta Vatsal. He is always serving his devotees. Then my emotions just choke up. And I can't help but cry at the Lord's magnanimity, his mercy towards his devotees. So Mahaprabhu, of course, he glorified that devotee. You are the greatest scholar of Bhagavad Gita, even though he couldn't practically read. He said, you are the greatest scholar, because Mahaprabhu's teachings, that there is actually a fifth goal of life beyond Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. There is Prema. Prema Pumarto Mahan. This is the secret perfectional stage of human existence beyond mundane religiosity, economic development, sense enjoyment, and so-called liberation. There is love for Krishna. And that one can achieve that state of perfection, just like there are some devotees of Krishna who just read Bhagavad Gita their whole life, and they become perfect, just like the Brahmana in South India. They achieve the perfection of existence. Because everything is there. There are two types of Krishna Katha, words spoken directly by the Lord and topics spoken about Krishna. And there are so many profoundly enlightening verses which one can read time and time again. They never become hackneyed or old or stale. They always remain ever fresh. We might scan the headlines of the news once or twice a day, but we never go back the following day because it's old news, it's hackneyed, it's usually bad anyway. So, but transcendental topics are not like that. They remain ever fresh and relishable. And they can have profound effect on the consciousness of the aspiring transcendentalist. Yavashayat mika buddhi ekeha kurunandana. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, those whose consciousness is irresolute, their consciousness is many-branched. And similarly, Bhogashvaya prashaktanam taya parita chetasam yavasya yatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and opulence and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. These two verses appear very close together, just 3 verses apart in the Bhagavad Gita. And of course, the first one, Yavasya Yatmika Buddhi, had a profound effect when Srila Prabhupada read that as a young man. And the following commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he was deeply impressed, and because in his commentary, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that if one simply takes the order one is given by one's Gurudev and tries to the best of his or her ability to execute it, then one doesn't have to wonder, am I making spiritual advancement or not? That's perfection. One simply tries to execute that order. So Prabhupada decided there and then that he would simply try to execute the order that he'd been given by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to preach in English, and if he ever got money, write books, and to try to get to English-speaking countries, as he did. So these verses are very wonderful, and so many wonderful names also that Arjuna addresses Krishna by, and also in reciprocation, Krishna addresses his dear devotee Arjuna, such as beloved child of the Kuru dynasty. Such a wonderful name. Which is exactly who Arjuna was. He was a great hero, a beloved child of the Kuru dynasty. So, that said, there is perfect, there is more perfect, and there is most perfect. I think Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, if the land is flooding and you have to move to higher ground, by all means take some shastras with you to read when you're stuck on the mountaintop or on your rooftop. Take Bhagavad Gita, take Srimad Bhagavatam, and take Caitanya Caritamrita. But as the flood waters rise and you're swimming about, you may have to let go of some of those books, otherwise you'll drown. So first of all, yes, you can let go of the Gita. And if the floods keep coming more and more severe, yes, you can let go of Srimad Bhagavatam, but hang on to the Caitanya Caritamrita, which is what we're reading at least 2 days a week, Saturdays and Sundays. And we've been doing that for some time now, Krishna Kirtan, a couple of years, yeah, as we're doing in many of Prabhupada's temples. So, but in the Gita, Krishna doesn't give a lot of intimate information about himself or his abode. He explains that the spiritual realm is not illuminated by sunlight or moonlight or electricity, and for one who goes there, he never comes back to this abode. But and then, of course, there are 5 very important topics we should never neglect or forget in Bhagavad Gita. Who is Ishwara, the Supreme Lord? Who are the jivas, you and I, spirit souls? What is this material nature comprising the 3 modes of material nature? Kala, the time factor, and karma, the law of cause and effect, action and reaction. So they're the 5 great topics of Bhagavad Gita. Srimad Bhagavatam has 10 topics. It's said that for a Purana, which means old ancient histories, to be a Purana, it must have at least 5 topics. And Srimad Bhagavatam, being the Maha Bhagavat Purana, it has 10 topics. And one of those, and one of the final, if not the final topic of Srimad Bhagavatam, which one has to gradually progress towards, are the most intimate pastimes of the Supreme Lord as delineated in the 10th canto. But before getting there, Srila Vyasadeva, he very wonderfully takes us through so that by the time we do reach the 10th canto and read about Lord Sri Krishna's extraordinary pastimes, heroic pastimes, then we'll understand, we'll have a thorough understanding how Krishna is God, the Supreme Lord. He's the greatest hero, he's the most worshipable personality. We have the English word virile, it means a great hero. And the origins of that is the Sanskrit word virya, or vira, Mahavira, great hero. So that is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's Bhagavan. He has all opulences in full. Virabhadra, also the son of Lord Nityananda Prabhu. So it's that sweetness which is revealed in Srimad Bhagavatam. And it was wonderful yesterday to hear Banu Maharaj explain how, just as there is the fifth goal of life, prema, similarly beyond the four original Vedas, Hare Krishna, the Rig, Yaja, Sama and Atharva Vedas, it's described that there is Panchamam Veda, or the fifth Veda, which is the Mahabharata, which includes Bhagavad Gita, and all the Puranas. So that's been described so wonderfully by Srila Jiva Goswami in his writings. So it's this this intimacy, or this deeper understanding of who Krishna is, which is revealed in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And of course, devotees who are anxious for that, we can have an official relationship, and many jivas are satisfied with that relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead as order supplier. Krishna, God, give me this, give me that. And Krishna can very easily fulfill all our material demands, but he's more interested in us offering or trying to serve him with devotion. And that is, of course, known as Bhagavat Dharma. Sanatana Dharma is described as the eternal occupational activity of the soul, as Prabhupada quoted in that purport, very famous instruction from Caitanya Caritamrita, Jivara Swaruphoy Krishna Nityadas. Krishna Nityadas. The soul is by nature Krishna's eternal servant. Prabhupada gives the wonderful example that, or at least the translation of Sanatana Dharma, as that which does not change. Just like sugar is always sweet, heat and light are always the aspects of fire. Water is always a liquid. If it changes its constitution and freezes, then we don't call it water anymore, we call it ice. So, Sanatana Dharma, the eternal engagement of the spirit soul. And Bhagavat Dharma, loving devotional service to Krishna. So, devotional service, of course, attracts Krishna. And the whole essence of Srimad Bhagavatam is, by studying it throughout one's life, it's meant to actually kindle, revive our dormant attraction for Krishna by hearing, by giving submissive oral reception to Krishna. Krishna's pastimes, which are extraordinary and very wonderful. And one can become perfect. We know there are 9 principal angas of bhakti, beginning with Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Vishnu Smaranam. So, and one can become perfect by practicing one of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them, or all of them. But at least one of them. And of course we're encouraged to do the first 3 in a significant way every day. That is hearing and chanting and remembering Krishna. And of course one can find other devotional activities to perform which one has a natural inclination for. Somehow or other try to assist in the mission, this wonderful mission of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, which is very easy and sublime. Chanting, dancing, feasting, a little philosophy. In another purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada does state that if there are just 3 things at the Sunday feast, Krishna Kirtan, Krishna Katha, and Krishna Prasada, then Mahaprabhu himself comes as the invisible guest at the Sunday feast. Of course, their lordships, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, are in most ISKCON temples present now in their most merciful Archa Vigraha forms. But in the early days, Ramai Maharaj will know better than all of us, there were many early temples, there were no deities, just Guru Gauranga altars, picture altars. And there is a famous painting done by Babi Devi Dasi. The last I saw it was in the restaurant in Brisbane. I think it might still be there, of the Panchatattva. Somebody from Brisbane may know. Beautiful painting done in the early 70s. Charu and Babi, 2 of the early pioneers of Krishna consciousness here in Australia. Babi, very talented artist. Gorgeous painting of their lordships, the Panchatattva. And in the early days here in Australasia, that painting was the worshipable deity in a number of the early temples. We actually had it in Christchurch for a while. Whenever a new temple would be open, the painting would come. And then later, of course, as things developed, became more established, then deities would come as well. So, and of course, Mahaprabhu can be worshipped very simply with kirtan and some discussion, and of course the distribution of prasadam. So it's very wonderful. If one gets a taste, of course we do have to get a taste. It all hinges on getting a taste for chanting Krishna's names and for hearing about him and developing that taste more and more and more. There was a wonderful, and of course when we're allowed to, unprecedented times this year, but when we are given the opportunity to share Krishna consciousness with others. If somebody has something really wonderful, only a miserly person will not want to share it with close family and friends. If we're blessed to own a nice home, then we invite our family and our friends to come by, and we entertain them in our home. We share our nice home with them. So Krishna consciousness is such a nice thing that, of course, it's Mahaprabhu's mission and the mission of our acharyas to share it with whoever's a little curious inquisitive, serious, sincere, searching. There was a wonderful Rath Yatra in San Francisco in 1974. It's very easy to find the video footage of it. It was filmed wonderfully by Vishaka and Yaruba, thank you, prabhus. Extraordinary Rath Yatra. Hundreds of devotees from all over the West Coast, and many came from the East Coast. 3 chariots, Golden Gate Park, beautiful summer's afternoon, 1974. Srila Prabhupada was there, riding triumphantly on Lady Subhadra's chariot. The police estimated there were between 15 and 20,000 people in Golden Gate Park. Devotees that were there, who were fortunate enough to be there, said it was just not of this world. And after the wonderful Rath Yatra, a devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, it says in the Nectar of Devotion that if a person just stands up and greets Lord Jagannath as he glides majestically by on his Rath, what to speak of, pulls the ropes, then that person attains a 4-armed form, just like Lord Narayan, and goes to Vaikuntha. Is that true, Srila Prabhupada? Prabhupada said, well, if it's in Nectar of Devotion, it must be true. And absolutely it is, because Srila Prabhupada's wonderful summary study of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which he titled Nectar of Devotion, Srila Rupa Goswami drew from many different references, just as we're hearing Mahaprabhu gradually changing the mind of Prakashananda Saraswati from impersonalism to personalism. So Srila Rupa Goswami and the other Goswamis, they drew so many wonderful references from different Vedic literatures, Puranas. Most importantly, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavat Purana, but many other wonderful Puranas are there, and they have such references. And there is one of the Puranas, it's actually interesting because it's one of the 6 Puranas specifically meant as reading matter for persons steeped in the mode of ignorance. That's called the Skanda Purana, and it's the largest of all Puranas. And there is a whole section in the Skanda Purana known as the Vaishnava Kanda. There's actually 4 chapters. And within that there is what's known as the Bhagavat Mahatmya, or the glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam. And some of us may know His Grace, Gopi Pranadana Prabhu. He took the trouble of translating that, doing his own translation of the Bhagavat Mahatmya, glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam. And it is within that you find these wonderful statements, such as just by standing up and offering respects, what to speak of just walking alongside or walking behind or pulling the ropes of Lord Jagannath's chariot, one will return to Vaikuntha. And so that reference is there. Similarly, it's said that for anybody who sees Lord Jagannath on his Rath during Rath Yatra festival, that is the image which will stick in our consciousness at the moment of death, as the film reel rewinds through our life. And then that beautiful face of Lord Jagannath, buff-coloured, blooming Jagannath, that is what will capture us at the end of our lifetime. And we might think, well, what about so many of us may or may not, we may pass away in a hospital, appearing to be in an unconscious state. But there are also many wonderful references, and Ramanujacharya had one from one of the Puranas, which, and I think also his worshipable deity, Ishtadev, Lord Ranganath, may have appeared to him in a dream one time, because Ramanujacharya was pondering on this. He was meditating very deeply that devotees leave their bodies in all sorts of different circumstances. So how is it necessarily possible to think of Krishna at that important time as one's leaving the body? And Lord Ranganath appeared to Ramanujacharya and said, don't worry about this. It may be that my devotee can't remember me at the time of death, but I never forget my devotee, and I come for him, and I never forget the service that my devotees have rendered to me throughout their lifetime. So wonderful confirmation is there. As nice as Krishna consciousness is, and as attached as we become throughout our lives to Krishna and the association of the devotees, and we try, depending on our capacity, to render as much service as we can during our lifetime, and leave the rest up to Krishna. So I might stop here. Thank you so much. Any questions, comments, or corrections, please? I don't know if we have a microphone. Sometimes we do like that. But, Prabhu, G.
Thank you for your class.
Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your class today. I just had a question about your statement at the start of the lecture. You said that there's perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. Mm-hmm. So, how do we understand this statement? Is this reference to a level of devotion, and how do we measure that level of devotion?
Well, one level of perfection is just to realize we're not the body, and that Krishna's God, and realize that we're his eternal servants. And of course we can increase on that, just as we have Kanishta, Madhyam and Uttama Adhikaris. So there is a hierarchy in the association of devotees. We need to be constantly striving to become more perfect in our realization, to give up the anarthas which torment us, the remaining attached to very insignificant pleasures of this mortal realm. So we have to start somewhere, and of course we have to try and deepen our state of Krishna consciousness. Life's short, and if we've come to the realization, even academically or intellectually, as Maharaj was saying again yesterday, we have Gyan and we have Vigyan. So we may have some intellectual conviction, but then we want to deepen that, make it more perfect. Just like Burfi starts out as milk, but it's cooked down and down and down and down until it becomes really condensed, thick. Or sugar starts out as sugar cane, but then it goes through different processes, and from just raw sugar to liquid molasses, and then you get just condensed lozenges of sugar. So we want to perfect more and more. Yeah. Maharaj, you want to add something to that? Anything else? Anyone else? he didn't actually translate the whole Skanda Purana, but he did a translation of just the 4 chapters known as the Vaishnava Kanda. It may be available. He quotes it quite regularly in his lectures. Yeah. So, and within that you have, he quotes it, yeah, because he did a translation. He's very familiar with it. There's a lot of really wonderful topics there. There's also the Dwarka Mahatmya, and he actually describes how the great-grandson of Krishna, Vrajanabha, came and became the king of Mathura 100 years after Krishna's disappearance. And Pariksit Maharaj actually anointed him as the king of Mathura. And if you're a little interested in our Gaudiya Vaishnava history, it was as a result of Krishna's great-grandson Vrajanabha coming and becoming the king of Mathura and repopulating Mathura and establishing many deities of Krishna. So that's all described in the Skanda Purana, actually, in the Vaishnava Kanda. It's really fascinating. You might be able to research it and find it. Anything else? Anyone? All right. Sri Caitanya Caritamrita ki. Srila Prabhupada ki.